The story of the Algerian War of Independence does not begin in 1954. It begins more than a century earlier. In 1830, French forces invaded Algeria under the pretext of a diplomatic insult. But beneath the excuses lay a larger ambition. France wanted a colony that would restore national pride after internal turmoil. Algeria became the target. The invasion was swift, but domination was not. For decades, France faced constant resistance from Algerian tribes, religious leaders, and warriors. The most legendary of them was Emir Abdelkader, whose disciplined army fought a relentless guerrilla campaign. He united tribes, built alliances, and challenged France with a determination that shocked Europe. But France wanted total control. By the late 1800s, Algeria was transformed into something different from other colonies. It became an extension of France itself. Hundreds of thousands of European settlers, known as Pieds Noirs, were moved into Algerian land, granted rights, farms, and political power. Meanwhile, Algerians were pushed aside, losing their land, citizenship, and representation. Algeria was ruled by racial hierarchy, military presence, and strict policing. And beneath the silence, tension grew. As World War II began, many Algerians fought for France, believing loyalty might bring reform. They served in deserts, forests, and Europe's front lines, but when they returned home, they saw nothing had changed. They were still second-class citizens in their own land. In May 1945, as Europe celebrated victory, protests erupted in the towns of Sétif, Guelma, and Kurreda, demanding freedom and equality. The response was brutal. Thousands of Algerians were killed in a crackdown that shook the nation. And after that moment, one truth became undeniable: the next fight would not be for reforms. It would be for independence. At any cost. Algeria had become a land under pressure, building toward an explosion that the world could not yet see. The year is 1954, and the world is shifting. European empires are weakening, nationalist movements are rising, and Algeria, after 132 years of French rule, stands at a breaking point. Rumors spread through villages, towns, and hidden mountain camps. A new resistance group has formed. A new strategy is coming. A new Algeria is possible. That group was the FLN, Front de Libération Nationale. Across the Ors Mountains, FLN commanders hold night meetings under dim lanterns, drawing plans on dusty ground. Their goal was not small, not reform, not negotiation, but total independence. On November 1, 1954, known today as Toussaint Rouge, the Red All Saints' Day, the FLN launched coordinated attacks across Algeria. French military outposts, police stations, communication lines all hit in the span of hours. The colonial administration was stunned. Paris responded immediately: "This is not a war, this is banditry." But Algeria's people knew the truth. For the first time in generations, hope felt real. France strikes back. As attacks spread, France deployed tens of thousands of soldiers, including paratroopers hardened by previous wars in Indochina. What began as a rebellion quickly escalated into a full-scale war. French forces sealed off mountain regions. Entire villages were relocated into regroupment camps. Curfews tightened. Suspicion grew like wildfire. Meanwhile, the FLN expanded, gathering recruits from farmers, students, intellectuals, and former colonial soldiers. Every successful attack inspired more Algerians to join. The FLN's message was clear: independence or death. A war of shadows. This was not fought on open battlefields. It was a war of ambushes in narrow mountain passes. Secret FLN cells inside cities. Bombings in cafes and nightclubs. French torture chambers aimed at extracting intelligence. Propaganda battles fought through newspapers and radio. Both sides committed atrocities. Both sides believed they were fighting for survival. And the world watched as Algeria became one of the most brutal anti-colonial conflicts of the 20th century. But despite the overwhelming military might of France, one thing became clear: the Algerian people were no longer afraid. By 1956, the Algerian War had entered a new and more dangerous phase. The FLN had proven its strength in rural strongholds, the Ours, Kabylia, and the vast interior. But now, a new strategy emerged: bring the war to the cities. Bring the war to the world's attention. And at the heart of this shift was one place: Algiers, the capital that became a battlefield. Algiers was divided, tense, and tightly controlled by the French. European settlers filled the modern districts, while Algerians were pushed into overcrowded neighborhoods like the Kasbah, a maze of alleys, stairways, and hidden doors. A perfect place for resistance. The FLN assigned 3 young commanders to lead the urban campaign. One of them would rise to global fame: Ali Lapointe, a former prisoner with fierce courage, recruited from the heart of the Kasbah. Soon, bombs, assassinations, and secret operations shook the city. FLN bombs the city. Women fighters, disguised in European clothes, planted bombs in cafes, nightclubs, bus stops, Jewish and European districts. Each explosion shook France's confidence in its colonial project. Algeria was no longer a distant outpost, it was now a battleground covered in international headlines. France responds with an iron fist. Paris sent in its most feared unit, General Jacques Massu's paratroopers. Their mission: destroy the FLN's urban network at all costs. And so began one of the most ruthless chapters of the war, the Battle of Algiers. Paratroopers raided homes day and night, dragging suspects into trucks. Thousands were interrogated. Many were tortured. Some vanished forever. The Kasbah became a fortress under siege. And yet, Ali Lapointe and the FLN continued to strike. The city echoed with bomb blasts, military boots, and the cries of families caught in the middle. The world takes notice. For the first time, international newspapers reported the brutality of the conflict. France's image began to crack. The United Nations debated Algeria's right to self-determination. Algeria's struggle was no longer hidden. It had become a global cause. But at a terrible cost. By late 1957, after months of street battles, arrests, and raids, French forces closed in on the last FLN safe house in the Kasbah. Ali Lapointe refused to surrender. The French placed explosives under the building. The explosion was deafening. Ali Lapointe and the remaining resistance fighters were killed instantly, but their sacrifice ignited a fire across the entire nation. The FLN had lost the Battle of Algiers, but won the moral victory. Across Algeria, thousands more joined the fight. The French had captured the city, but lost the people. Algeria moved one step closer to liberation. By 1958, the Algerian War of Independence had exploded into one of the most violent struggles of the 20th century. The Battle of Algiers had ended, but the war had transformed into something even more brutal, a nationwide confrontation that neither side could fully control. The borders become battlefields. As French forces tightened their grip on the cities, the FLN shifted its strategy to the mountains and borders. Two critical frontiers became lifelines: Tunisia east, Morocco west. From these neighboring countries, the FLN's military wing, the ALN, received new recruits. Medical supplies. Weapons. Safe routes for commanders to regroup. But France responded aggressively. General Challa launched massive border operations, electrified fences, minefields, air raids, and fortified lines, designed to cut off FLN fighters from their supply bases. Still, the ALN infiltrated relentlessly. Young men crossed the borders at night, walking through mountains and deserts, risking death for the dream of independence. The border became a symbol of sacrifice. The massacre that shocked the world Sakiat 1958. Then came the event that changed everything. On February 8, 1958, French aircraft crossed into Tunisia, a sovereign country, and bombed the village of Sakiat Sidi Youssef. The attack killed over 70 people, including children and Red Cross workers. The world erupted in outrage. Newspapers condemned France. Protests spread across Africa and the Middle East. The United Nations demanded explanations. For the first time, Algeria's war wasn't just a colonial conflict. It became a global crisis. France's government began to collapse under pressure. Political chaos in France. The war was draining money, dividing society, and damaging France's reputation. The Fourth Republic was falling apart. Cries grew louder, "Bring back Charles de Gaulle." De Gaulle returned to power in June 1958, promising order. Many French settlers in Algeria believed he would save French Algeria. They did not know a political earthquake was coming. De Gaulle's shift toward self-determination. At first, de Gaulle strengthened France's military presence. Thousands of troops poured into Algeria. Operations intensified. But privately, de Gaulle knew something: France could not win this war. Too many Algerians supported independence. Too much blood had been shed. Too much international pressure had built. In September 1959, de Gaulle announced it publicly: Algerians have the right to choose their future, including independence. The settlers were furious. The French army was divided. The FLN saw hope for the first time. The war was not over, but the end had begun. As de Gaulle slowly moved toward a political solution, Algeria descended into a new kind of chaos. A war not just between France and the FLN, but between French settlers, Pieds Noirs, the French government, and extreme military factions. The conflict was no longer one line. It was now a triangle of enemies, each fighting for a different future. The Pieds Noirs, a community in fear. For over 100 years, Europeans had lived in Algeria: farmers, merchants, workers, families who knew no other home. To them, Algeria was France. Their lives, safety, and identity depended on it. So when de Gaulle hinted at independence, panic swept through. Massive protests filled the streets of Algiers. Settlers attacked government buildings. Militias formed to defend French Algeria. The most explosive group among them would soon emerge: the OAS organization Armée Secrète. A clandestine, ultra-violent settler paramilitary determined to stop independence. They targeted FLN members, civilians, French soldiers, French politicians, and even de Gaulle himself. Bombings shook Algiers, Oran, and Constantine. France was watching its colony transform into a battleground of ideology and revenge. The French army splits. The French military, already exhausted by years of war, now faced an impossible moral dilemma: follow de Gaulle, or side with the settlers who shouted treason. In April 1961, several generals attempted a coup in Algeria. A bold effort to overthrow de Gaulle and keep Algeria French. The coup failed. But it sent a message: France was tearing itself apart. Ongoing FLN resistance. Meanwhile, the FLN, despite heavy losses, continued its operations, raids in rural regions. Political mobilization in villages. Revolutionary radio broadcasts. International diplomacy in Cairo, Tunis, and New York. Every Algerian killed or tortured only deepened national anger and strengthened resolve. Villagers whispered, independence or death. Negotiations begin. The Evian talks. By 1961, even the French public wanted the war to end. The cost in lives and money was unbearable. Secret negotiations started between France and the FLN's provisional government. The talks were tense: borders, prisoners, oil resources in the Sahara, the future of settlers, the political status of the new state. Nothing was easy. Everything was fragile. But one truth guided the process: Algeria would no longer be ruled by France. The momentum of history had shifted. A nation nearing freedom. Bombs still exploded. The OAS still terrorized civilians. French troops still patrolled cities and mountains. FLN commanders still planned last operations. But behind the violence, a new chapter was taking shape. Algeria was close to being born. The question was no longer if Algeria would gain independence, but how much blood would be spilled before it arrived. After 8 long years of bloodshed, diplomacy, and national sacrifice, the Algerian War of Independence reached its climactic moment. The world watched. France was exhausted. The FLN was unbroken. The settlers were desperate. The Algerian people were ready. A nation stood on the edge of history. The Evian Agreements, March 18, 1962. After months of negotiations, France and the FLN finally reached a deal in the town of Evian-les-Bains, near the French Alps. The agreement declared a ceasefire, a referendum for self-determination, amnesty for prisoners, guarantees for European settlers, recognition of Algeria as an independent state. On March 19, 1962, the ceasefire took effect. For the first time since 1954, the guns began to fall silent. Women wept. Men embraced. Villages celebrated. The world applauded. But not everyone accepted peace. The OAS war against independence. The settler extremist group, the OAS, launched its most violent campaign yet. They carried out bombings, assassinations, sabotage, arson. Whole neighborhoods in Algiers and Oran burned. Their final hope was to provoke enough chaos that France would abandon the Evian Agreements. But history had already moved on. Even many settlers realized independence was inevitable. The OAS was fighting a war that was already lost. The referendum, July 1, 1962. Algerians finally had the chance to answer a single question: do you want Algeria to become an independent state? The result was overwhelming: over 99% voted yes. Across Africa and the Middle East, celebrations erupted. In France, silence spread: the colonial world was collapsing. In Algeria, fireworks and chants filled the night sky. A dream born in the mountains, in prisons, in villages, and in whispered prayers had finally become real. July 5, 1962, Independence Day. On this day, exactly 132 years after French troops first invaded Algeria in 1830, the country raised its flag: green for hope, white for peace, red for the blood of martyrs. Crowds filled the streets of Algiers, chanting, Tahia el Jazair. Long live Algeria! The FLN transformed into the new government. Travelers returned from exile. Children danced barefoot in village squares. Old men wiped tears from their eyes. But independence came with painful realities. The exodus of settlers. Nearly 1 million Europeans fled Algeria in a matter of months. Ships and planes leaving Algiers and Oran were packed with families crying, holding pictures of the homes they would never see again. For some Algerians, their departure symbolized liberation. For others, it was a tragic ending to a century of shared life. Algeria was free, but deeply scarred. The cost of victory. The price of independence was enormous, over 1 million Algerians dead, estimates vary. Thousands displaced. Cities damaged. Communities divided. Families shattered. Yet, in the ashes of war, a nation was reborn. Algeria became a founding member of African liberation movements, a symbol of anti-colonial struggle, a voice for justice and sovereignty across the world. The war had ended, but the legacy had only begun. Epilogue: A Light for Africa. The Algerian War of Independence became the blueprint for liberation movements across the continent. From Mozambique to Kenya, South Africa to Guinea-Bissau, oppressed people saw what Algeria achieved and said, "We can fight too." The longest, hardest colonial battle in African history had helped ignite a continent-wide transformation. And in the end, despite all the pain and sacrifice, Algeria stood tall as a nation that had reclaimed its name, its land, and its destiny.